Hello, my name is Matthew, and I'm with the Tampa-Hillsborough County Public Library. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the photography and legacy of Griffith J. Davis. And I should say right before that, that is going to be an evening with Dorothy Davis, who is presenting that to us tonight. Welcome, Dorothy. We're so glad to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent, excellent. And we have a couple of other people we're going to introduce as well. But first, I want to let you know that today is Thursday, February 11th of 2021. How is it February already of 2021? I just can't believe it. But this is part of our Black History Month celebration, hcplc.org/Black History Month. There you can find out all about some of the events that we've already done, and some of which are going to be posted to our YouTube channel soon, and a couple that we have coming up, as well as some excellent book lists and things like that. So join in the celebration with us and go to that link when you can. Before we start our program, I'm going to introduce one of our colleagues here at the library, Alexandra. Hi, Alexandra, to do our book shout out.
Hi there, Matthew. Thank you. We're actually previewing 3 things for you to check out that are related to tonight's wonderful program. What we have first is an ebook, The Imprisoned in a Luminous Glare. This is actually something that the author deems photographs as the essential source for understanding the anti-lynching, civil rights, and Black Power movements, and also demonstrates persuasively how the meanings of photographs vary from one context to another. On the center of your screen, we also have featuring the documentary on our Canopy screening service. This is actually a great documentary for being the first documentary to explore the role of photography in shaping the identity of African Americans from slavery to present. There's also some photos included in there that otherwise would be forgotten, that haven't been seen, both taken by professional photographers as well as amateur photographers. And lastly, we're also featuring the book Revolution in Black and White. This is produced with the photos of Ernest C. Withers, who was one of the most prominent African American photographers in the civil rights years. But besides focusing on photos of the movement, he also captured everyday life and was also a noted baseball photographer as well as a music photographer. So there's thousands of photographs of early jazz, blues, rock, and roll and R&B performers featured.
All right, thank you so much, Alexandra. Alexandra's going to turn off our camera, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can introduce our lead moderator for tonight. Dr. Antoinette Jackson is the chair of the, is it Anthropology Department? Did I get that right at USF?
You did, you sure did.
University of South Florida Anthropology Department. She's the chair there, and she's going to be our lead moderator and introduce our very special guest for tonight. I'm going to turn off my camera, and I will rejoin you guys at the Q&A section at the end.
Thank you, Matthew. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this evening to introduce our speaker tonight. Dorothy M. Davis is truly an accomplished professional who wears many hats. This introduction will only scratch the surface. Before I start, I want to give a quick shout out to a mutual friend of ours who introduced us, Ms. Muriel Brathwaite, for bringing us together and inspiring us to do the work that we're doing. I also want to thank the USF Museum of Contemporary Art, particularly Noelle Smith and her team, for being able to open us up to this exhibit and this talk, and to also be inspired by the introduction that I made of the museum team to Dorothy Davis. And the potential collaboration has resulted in tonight's production. Ms. Davis is a business entrepreneur, writer, and filmmaker. She is president of Dorothy M. Davis Consulting, an international development and communication consulting and project management firm. She credits her global perspective and ability to organize complex issues into manageable and sustainable solutions to having been born in Liberia, to pioneering United States Foreign Service parents of American, Caribbean, and Native American lineage. Also, she came of age and attended schools in Tunisia, Nigeria, Switzerland, and the US. Ms. Davis received her bachelor's degree in broadcasting and film with a minor in political science from Boston University and her master's degree from Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. She is a member of the Association of Media Photographers and serves on the boards of directors of both the Tampa Bay Businesses for Culture and the Arts, TBBCA, and the St. Petersburg Conference on World Affairs. Ms. Davis has worked extensively for a spectrum of United Nations agencies, the African American Institute, and other institutions across Europe and the United States, Africa, the Caribbean, China, and Japan. She specializes in collaborating with the UN and US Diplomatic Corps on projects across the globe, with a particular emphasis on Africa and the diaspora. Ms. Davis is a recipient of several awards and accolades over the course of her career for professional work and humanitarian efforts. In April 2014, she received the Global Poverty Award from the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority for her impact on the Sierra Leaf Market Women's Fund. Ms. Davis combines and leverages her upbringing and international communication and development skills and experiences to also curate and promote her father's legacy of over 55,000 images through a company she started, Griffith J. Davis Photographs and Archives. Griff Davis, her father, was a pioneer international photographer, journalist, and US Senior Foreign Service Officer. As president of Griffith J. Davis Photographs and Archives, Ms. Davis curated her father's never-before-seen photographs of his letters with Harlem Renaissance writer Langston Hughes for an exhibition right here in the Tampa, Florida area at the Museum of Photographs and Photographic Arts, downtown Tampa. I hope you got to see that exhibit. It was wonderful. Dorothy Davis, as I have been saying, is indeed an exemplary person. She wears many hats. Most important, from my vantage point, she is a friend and an inspiration. Every time I talk to Dorothy, I learn something new. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our esteemed expert for tonight's conversation, Ms. Dorothy M. Davis.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. That was very nice of you. I really appreciate the things that you said, and I really appreciate our friendship and what has come from it. Before I start, I wanted to say, go Tampa Bay. Congratulations to Tampa on winning the Super Bowl. That was outstanding. As Dr. Jackson said, I am bringing my dad's photographs to the attention of the Contemporary Art Museum at the University of South Florida College of the Arts because of Dr. Jackson. It evolved from a conversation we had at some point. I am honored to be able to speak this evening to you, members of the Tampa-Hillsborough County Public Library Cooperative, the University of South Florida Contemporary Art Museum, and the audience at large about the photography and legacy of my father, Griffith J. Davis. First, I want to start by acknowledging that this event and our exhibition are taking place during Black History Month. With that in mind, here is a 1947 portrait taken by my dad as a Morehouse College student of Harlem Renaissance poet Langston Hughes in Mr. Hughes's faculty apartment in an Atlanta University dormitory. It became the cover photo of the 1947 pocketbook edition of Mr. Hughes's book, The Ways of White Folks. Here's a self-portrait of my dad in Liberia several years later with the Atlantic Ocean as his background. It's an appropriate backdrop for one of my favorite poems written by my parents' lifelong friend, Langston Hughes. The Negro speaks of rivers. I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. For me, the poem captures the essence of the rich, conflicting tapestry of worlds in which my parents and our family lived at a time when our country and the world were birthing a new era. Dr. Henry Louis Skip Gates Jr. of Harvard University best describes my dad's role within that context. He said, and I quote, "A product of the Jim Crow era, Griff Davis stood at the vortex of history and the future as a Buffalo soldier in Italy during World War II, the Civil Rights Movement in the US, and the independence movement in Africa. Through his camera, writing, and diplomatic skills, he fought for freedom and independence by documenting changing times and being on the cutting edge of changing those times by shaping image, narrative, and policies. He was both an observer and interpreter of the times." Unquote. My questions to you, the audience, are: how do you describe something that someone has never seen before? How do you find common ground in the middle of extreme differences? My dad's way of doing it was by telling stories. Through his camera, he had you see what he saw, even if it was foreign to you. Through his typewriter and pen, he interpreted for his reader what he was revealing through the images of his camera. In many instances, he made you see and feel what you may not have wanted to see or feel. Yet in addition to the artistic aspects of his work, there was always a purpose. An Ethiopian friend of mine once told me, quote, "Your dad's photography maintains the dignity of the person or situation," unquote. In so doing, he requires us to see the human perspective of the other, regardless of our perceived differences. Each photograph in this exhibition has a contextual framework and story. It is why my co-curators, Noelle Smith, Deputy Curator of the Contemporary Art Museum, and Christian Viveros-Fauvet, CAM, Curator at Large, and I decided to entitle the exhibition Still Here, the Griffith J. Davis Photographs and Archives in Context. In that title, we make reference to the spirit of one of Langston Hughes' poems that I will read at the end of this presentation. My dad, the artist, preferred creating his imageries with a camera, pen, and typewriter rather than a paintbrush and canvas. To link the themes of the past with the present, I'm very happy that Noelle and Christian came up with the innovative idea of complementing my dad's photographs with those of amazing contemporary artists: Jacob Lawrence, Romare Bearden, Emory Douglas, Deanna Lawson, Zanelli Muholi, and especially Hank Willis Thomas, the son of Dr. Deborah Willis, the global authority on African American photographers and photography. She was a friend of my dad and has been an advisor to me since after his death in 1993. As a daughter or son, you are born into unchosen circumstances. You appear in your parents' lives 9 months after gestation and without knowing their histories or the context in which you find yourself. In a sense, you figuratively hit the ground running while simultaneously trying to learn how to walk. My parents were trailblazers, so essentially they had no roadmap except for their values, sense of adventure and purpose, intellect, and life experiences. So while they are creating a new context for the world, my brother and I are being shaped by that new world without context. As a child, I did not realize until later that my dad converted his passion for taking photographs into a unique combination of professions, and that his workplace as a trailblazing photographer, journalist, and U.S. Foreign Service diplomat was the world. Still Here, the Griffith J. Davis Photographs and Archives in Context is the first time that his international photographs of Liberia, Ghana, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Tunisia, taken between 1949 and 1960, are being shown in combination with noted writers, musicians, artists, and philosophers. They represent different parts of his three-pronged global career. In my presentation, I will provide samples of photographs in each of these 6 different categories. Upon his death in 1993, he left 55,000 images along with a wide array of related written documentation in the form of correspondence, articles, and diplomatic reports. Born literally on the campus of Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, my dad grew up on Spelman College's campus because my grandfather was the superintendent of buildings and grounds. Starting in his high school years at Atlanta University Laboratory High School, he became the campus photographer and freelance photographer for C.A. Scott, publisher of the Atlanta Daily World, the first daily African-American newspaper in the U.S. Born in Seabright, New Jersey, my parents met when my mom, Muriel Karin Davis, became a student at Spelman, and my dad resumed his studies at Morehouse after the end of World War II in 1945. During his last semester at Morehouse, Dad took a creative writing course taught by visiting professor Langston Hughes at Atlanta University, and who would become a world famous and an American poet, novelist, playwright, and columnist. His relationship expanded into becoming Mr. Hughes's photographer while in Atlanta. In this photograph, my mother is sitting next to Langston Hughes as he is registering students for his creative writing class at Atlanta University. My parents at this point were just friends, but Dad got her attention by asking, "You want to meet Langston Hughes?" After all, he was 24 years old. Since tonight's program is hosted by the Tampa-Hillsborough County Public Library, I thought you'd be interested in seeing photographs taken by my dad of Langston Hughes addressing the Public Librarians Conference hosted by the Atlanta University School of Library Science on May 23, 1947. There were 97 Negro public librarians from 14 southern states attended the conference. You will notice that they are almost all women. First photograph you'll see is of Dr. Virginia Jones, who's standing. She was the director of the Atlanta University School of Library Service, giving welcoming remarks at the dinner meeting. Seated directly to the left of her is Dr. Rufus Clement, president of Atlanta University. Seated to his right is visiting professor Langston Hughes. The next one is visiting professor Langston Hughes giving his keynote speech as Dr. Rufus Clement and Dr. Virginia Jones listen. Then Dr. Virginia Jones brings a gift to the head table during a humorous moment. Here's another angle of visiting professor Langston Hughes giving his keynote speech. Langston Hughes signs autographs after his keynote speech. After graduating from Morehouse in June 1947, Langston Hughes became my dad's mentor. In fact, Dad became Ebony magazine's first roving editor at the recommendation of Langston Hughes to John H. Johnson, founder and publisher of Ebony. During his year at Ebony, he shot and wrote numerous stories, including Ebony's 1948 cover story about the honeymoon of singer Nat King Cole and Maria Cole in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. On his drive from Chicago to Mexico to cover that story, he heard that Thurgood Marshall, then chief counsel for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and future U.S. Supreme Court Justice, was defending Ada Lois Sitwell in a trial against the University of Oklahoma Law School in Norman, Oklahoma. It became the precedent-setting case for the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education victory against separate but equal education system in the United States of America. The U.S. Supreme Court later requested a copy of this print for their archives and included it in their 2015-2017 exhibition, Reading the Law, Legal Education in America at the U.S. Supreme Court. Dad resigned from his position at Ebony Magazine in 1948 to attend Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism at the recommendation of Langston Hughes. While attending Columbia, he rented a room in Mr. Hughes's Harlem home and accompanied him on some of his assignments as his photographer. Here are two of his iconic images of entertainers. Legendary singer Lena Horne at a backstage party at the Copacabana Club in New York City, circa 1949 to 1950. And here's another one that's one of my favorites. Jazz artist Duke Ellington composing at piano while blowing smoke, circa 1950. After graduating from Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism in 1949 as the only African American in his class, Dad became an international freelance photojournalist for Black Star Publishing Company from 1949 to 1952. Black Star was the first privately owned picture agency in the United States. He appeared in such publications as Fortune, Time, Modern Photography, New York Times, Life, Der Spiegel, Saturday Evening Post. Ebony published his exclusive article and photographs of His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie of Ethiopia as its cover story entitled The Private Life of Emperor Haile Selassie for its 5th anniversary issue of November 1950. This photo was taken by my dad in August 1951 as part of a photographic series for his story, Waning Empire, about the period leading to Nigerian independence in 1960. My dad wrote the caption, it says, Depart to Nigeria, August 1951. Nnamdi Benjamin Azikiwe, shown here, was the driving force, pun intended, behind the nation's independence and became the first president of Nigeria in 1963. He is seen here in an American Hudson sedan that drew applause and cheering Ziki from Nigerians who crowded roads to see the 46-year-old self-government now champion. While Dad was freelancing for Black Star, Mom graduated from Spelman College in 1950. She became the first African-American female to work at Doubleday Publishing in New York City. Their friendship blossomed into romance spanning across the Atlantic Ocean. In Dad's marriage proposal letter to my mom, he said that if she accepted, they would have to marry in Liberia because he had to finish editing the first promotional film, Pepperbird Land, that Liberia's president, William B.S. Tubman, had commissioned him to do. The film was being narrated in Liberia by emerging actor Sidney Poitier. She accepted and took her first trip on a plane from New York to Monrovia in March 1952 to marry my dad. President William B.S. Tubman attended their wedding reception. Dad's story and photographs of their global honeymoon from Caquetá, Liberia to Lisbon, Portugal, Paris, France, and Madrid, Spain, before returning to New York City, was published under the same headline in Ebony Magazine's September 1952 issue. Langston Hughes later modeled his book, Simple Takes a Wife, after my parents' marriage. Before leaving Liberia for their honeymoon, my dad was encouraged by the director of President Harry Truman's newly established Point 4 program in Liberia to apply for the U.S. Foreign Service exam. After passing the exam in October 1952, my parents returned to Liberia the next month as a pioneer U.S. Foreign Service family and as the U.S. Embassy's first information officer. This photo is an example of how he used his photography to illustrate why it was necessary to the US to fund a proposal to convert this waterfall into a source of electricity for the village below. Around this time, Liberia's president, William B.S. Tubman, invited Gold Coast Prime Minister Kwame Nkrumah to make an historic visit to Liberia in January 1953. Nkrumah was at the forefront of the independence movement in Africa. At a reception held in his honor on President Tubman's yacht in Monrovia, Nkrumah offered to teach my mother how to dance the Gold Coast's most popular dance, the highlight. You will notice that she's holding her head high. That's because she was pregnant with me and suffering from morning sickness. She was afraid that she might throw up on him. My brother Ben was born 2 years later. We lived in Liberia for the first 4 years of my life. We would accompany Mom to pick up Dad from work at the US Embassy. That's really all I knew about his work. Dad took a lot of pictures of us as a family. This photo appeared on the front page of the Liberian newspaper when I was 3. I am kissing my friend goodbye. He was leaving Liberia with his family because his father had become Liberia's ambassador to the US. His mother was my godmother. Dad's last assignment as information officer at the US Embassy Monrovia was to be the official photographer for the US delegation to Ghana's first independence celebration, led by then Vice President Richard Nixon in March 1957. On his way to Ghana, Nixon stopped in Liberia. There was a receiving line. My parents told me that they included me in the receiving line to meet the Vice President. My mom was holding me in her arms. When Nixon reached our family, he leaned over to give me a kiss. I immediately rejected him. My reaction horrified my parents because they thought it would reflect badly on my dad's career as a Foreign Service officer. They tried to coerce me to let him give me a kiss. He tried. I rebuffed him again. He moved on to the next person in line. My parents were very upset with me. But what could I do? I was a kid. When the US delegation attended Ghana's independence celebration, Dad took the iconic photograph of the first meeting of Vice President Richard Nixon and Martin Luther King Jr. with their respective wives, Patricia Nixon and Coretta Scott King, at a reception hosted by Ghana's Prime Minister and President Kwame Nkrumah in Accra. The Kings had just completed the Montgomery bus boycott a few months earlier and were invited by Nkrumah to attend the celebrations. It was the first trip to Africa for the Nixons and the King family. This photo was not allowed to be shown in the United States of America due to the heightened racial and political climate at the time. The Tampa Bay Times of Florida was the first publication to publish this rare photograph during the 2020 Martin Luther King holiday weekend. It was published along with my op-ed piece providing the background of the story. Just this past week, the United Nations Interpress Service published the photograph and my accompanying op-ed piece on their website. Here's some images taken by my dad of Ghana's first Independence Day celebration. You see Prime Minister Nkrumah first. This is Prime Minister Nkrumah's first handover ceremony as part of Ghana's independence celebrations in March 1957. You'll also see Prime Minister Kwame Nkrumah and his first cabinet as part of Ghana's first independence celebration. And this is the first time that the Ghanaian flag is being raised. My dad's photographs appeared in these issues. Time's cover photo of Nkrumah was taken by my dad. Our second diplomatic post was to newly independent Tunisia from 1957 to 1961. We were among the first wave of American families to be posted there. It was very different from Liberia in climate, population, culture, religion, and language. My mother was the first woman to drive in Tunisia. It was scandalous. She could pass as a Tunisian woman and would often get stopped by the police when she drove. They would let her go when they realized that she was an American. President Habib Bourguiba was the founding father of the nation. Everyone was excited when his motorcade would pass by in the streets of Tunis. Here's US President Dwight D. Eisenhower and Tunisia's founding father and president Habib Bourguiba meeting for the first time in newly independent Tunisia. Bourguiba gave Eisenhower 2 gazelles and a pretty brown horse as presents. Here's President Habib Bourguiba with Griffith Davis in his capacity as U.S. Foreign Service Officer for U.S. Embassy, Tunis. This is a newly arrived mobile cinema van. The newly arrived mobile cinema van is inspected at La Goulette port by Tunisian and U.S. Operations Mission officials, circa 1957. While posted in Tunisia, Dad was assigned to photograph missionary and Nobel laureate for peace, Dr. Albert Schweitzer, at his clinic for lepers in Lambaréné, Gabon, in 1960. For you writers and librarians, here's a photograph of playwright Wole Soyinka of Nigeria, the first Nobel laureate for literature from Africa, receiving an honorary doctorate from Morehouse College president Leroy Keith Jr. in 1988. Institutions from around the world wanted to give Mr. Soyinka an honorary degree. He initially refused to accept any of them. When our family was stationed in Nigeria during the Biafran War from 1966 to 1970, he and my dad became friends. Mr. Soyinka was frequently a political prisoner during the Biafran War. My dad frequently helped get him out of jail. Mr. Soyinka references my dad in his book, The Man Died. This is probably why my dad was able to convince him to accept this honorary degree from Morehouse College on behalf of all the other institutions that wanted to bestow the same honor on him. When I recently informed Mr. Soyinka about this exhibition, he responded by writing, quote, "Perfect timing. Era succeeds era this time to universal relief," unquote. Right before he died in 1993, Dad received the Benny Trailblazer Award from his alma mater, Morehouse College. Last October, he was posthumously honored with the 2020 Lifetime Achievement Impact Award from the Tampa Bay Businesses for Culture and the Arts at its 31st Annual Impact Awards Gala. I will end my presentation with another Langston Hughes poem, whose title is embedded in the title of the exhibition, Still Here. I've been scarred and battered. My hopes the wind done scattered. Snow has freezed me, sun has baked me. Looks like between them they done tried to make me. Stop laughing, stop loving, stop living, but I don't care. I'm still here. Thank you.
All right. So first question up. Are all of Mr. Davis's 55,000 photographs categorized, meaning, cataloged and classified, etc.?
No. The big answer is no. I've been working on this since he died, so it's what, 26 years or so. And this is the tip of the iceberg in terms of a coherent presentation. I have about 12 different what I call subjects where I could have 12 separate exhibitions, but the vast amount of it has to be, that's the work I have to do. I call it the backstory. That's the work that has to be done. Actually, I'm gonna put my glasses back on. And so this is part of having the exhibition, is to let people know the value of his work, and to seek partners in terms of finding ways to bring out the bulk of his work. There's a lot of photographs, and they're in different forms. They're in negatives, they're in contact sheets, they're in prints. A lot.
Dorothy, it was a great presentation. So a follow up to that, how have going through some of those 55,000 images made you see something you have not seen before, or see it in a different context, given that you're going through these photographs and in the contemporary time? What have you seen that you haven't seen before, or seen it now, see in a different light?
Well, I guess the first thing is I see my dad in a 360-degree perspective. So I know his work life and his personal life. So now that's all together. So that makes sense now. And then the other thing is that I realized when I first started, people thought, oh, it's just you're just very proud of your father. I mean, yeah, of course I'm proud of my father, but that's really not what my motivating part is. My motivation is that these stories that he covered, no one knows these stories. I mean, it was in a time when obviously there was no internet, and in Africa there wasn't television, everything was radio. So nobody knew each other's stories except in print, which is why ebony is so important, because ebony really captured what was happening in the civil rights movement on this side, and then what was happening in the independence movement in Africa. So I was able, and then growing up with him, so to speak, in his foreign service life, because my life was really only in the foreign service part of his life, I understood certain pieces of the countries in which we lived. I understood what they were going through. So all of these pieces have helped me put a narrative together that I can share with people in present day.
Thank you.
All right, we have another question coming in. Very practical question, which is always interesting to see. Are you looking for funding for such a project? I mean, what are some of the mechanics that go into it? Because going through that many photographs, that's no small thing. It probably takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and technology. And yeah, so what are some of the logistics that go into that project?
Well, you have to look at it from the standpoint of photographs, but then it's the written materials, because he was a journalist and then he was a diplomat, which means a lot of reports, right? And so I have all three categories, and they interface with each other. They help tell the story of each other. I mean, each of them are part of a joint, a combination of forces to explain what was going on. So what I need to do is I need to catalog them. I need to digitize them. I need to preserve them, and then basically to put them in forms that can help people understand what's happening. They're great educational tools, because it's an era that nobody really knows a lot, especially from the perspective of an African American in that era. And so I'm very happy that Cam has put together a study guide. That's very helpful in terms of explaining to this generation what happened back then, and also to help add another layer or two or three or four to a story that's already known. For instance, the King story, you can stop me anytime. The King story has many layers, and yes, it's the first meeting of King and Nixon. That's one layer. But the other layer is they are attending the independence celebration of Ghana, which is the first African country to become independent. And it's at the same time that essentially African Americans are trying to become free, so to speak, in the US through the civil rights movement. And here's my dad taking this photograph as a representative of the US government, because he's a US Foreign Service officer. He's not independent journalist in that capacity. He's serving as a U.S. Foreign Service officer. And so he's constrained because he has to, do the things the State Department wants you to do. At the same time, he's African American, and he's celebrating inside. He's celebrating along with Martin Luther King and Kwame Nkrumah and the rest of the people involved. So it's layers upon layers of stories.
And Dorothy, thinking about that brings to mind the other thing I read that you wrote in response to your father's photographs of Langston Hughes. You said he is able to show the human being lurking within the icon status. Yeah. How does that? It seems that that's a broad theme for a lot of his photographs and the things that seem to be a takeaway for a lot of the ones that I'm looking at. So even in that one that you're describing, how do you see like the essence, the everydayness of an iconic photograph and iconic people? And how does your father? How does that resonate with you?
Okay, so there are a lot of quote iconic people in these photographs, but the thing is that my dad had a personal relationship with a lot of them. So like Langston Hughes, like I said, he was his professor, then he was his mentor, he was his photographer, and then they just became lifelong friends, and they helped each other with their respective careers. Dad helped him identify African writers when Langston Hughes was trying to put a book together on, I think it's African Treasury, something like that, but it was purely African writers. So, and then with King, I mean, King had to, Coretta Scott King, King got sick on that trip. Okay, he got sick, and Dad had to help them, navigate him through that. And he already knew him as a Atlanta boy, so to speak. They grew up together. So, yes, there's the official side, so to speak, which my dad respected, but it was really about who are you as a human being. And that's basically what he and my mom taught us. So a lot of these people, yeah, they were around, but I didn't know who they were. Like Langston Hughes died in, I don't know, 67. I didn't know until I read his obituary in New York Times who Langston Hughes was. Okay, he was just Dad's friend, Mom's friend. That's it. And I just took him from that. So
yeah,
like that.
Yeah, thank you.
Somehow instinctively you knew who Nixon was when you were just a kid.
Nixon. When Nixon got into trouble, let's put it that way, when he got into trouble later on in life, I would point to my parents how my wisdom, that I knew at 3 there was something wrong. Okay, so I rest my case. That's what I told them.
I wanted to let everybody know, you mentioned CAM in the study guide and things like that. I posted in the chat cam.usf.edu. We'll be doing full contact information in just a few minutes, but cam.usf.edu to access the exhibition, the images, 3D virtual tour, that extensive study guide that was very expertly put together for the exhibit. So if you click on that link in the chat, and even if you navigate away, you'll be able to come back to the session here so that you have that open for later visiting. We have a question that was sent in actually in advance of the session tonight, but I see that the person who submitted it is here, so I want to let them know that we're going to be asking that question now, which is, are you contemplating a book of your father's photography and his foreign service career?
Yes. All my friends are after me. Yes. I am contemplating a book, both of the photography and just his story, to just document it. The part of this story would be that he actually resigned from, this is what I found out in the correspondence, and I told my mom, and she said, I didn't know that. So anyway, he actually, when Nkrumah came to Liberia, my parents hosted him and his entourage in our home and with a reception, and it was clear by Ambassador Dudley, who was the first African American ambassador anywhere in the world. Okay, so he was the first one, and it was cleared. And then my father gave remarks because it brought the journalists from Ghana as well as the Liberian ones and any other international journalists together. And he, like I said, he cleared his remarks. Well, State Department headquarters found out that he gave these remarks and thought he was being too supportive, let's say. He was interfering in internal affairs. That's, and so Ambassador Dudley and other people involved did not really stand up for my dad at that point, which I can understand from their perspective. But it really made him mad, so he resigned, right? And then President Tubman, who he was close to, brought him in and said, "You can't resign. That's not negotiable." And so they found a way so he could take his resignation letter back and continue his work. So, I bring that up because of the tension of being a African American Foreign Service officer in Ghana. I mean, in Liberia, where actually you're experiencing more freedom than you have in the U.S. Because in the U.S., Jim Crow was going on and all kinds of things were going on. So that's the kind of line they walked.
And how has your knowledge of the Jim Crow period been shaped by your father's photography, or just the experiences of your parents? As you think back, I guess, on those times or those stories they might have shared.
Well, the thing is, my parents did not talk about it. I think they made a conscious decision not to talk about it so that it would not affect our mindset. They wanted us to feel like we could do anything and no one could stop us. And growing up in those countries, basically that's what you're going to learn. So especially as they're becoming free. So we didn't have that. But what I think part of the reason why they decided that was, I think that once he basically left Atlanta, or the Jim Crow era, so area, I'll call it area, he felt free. I have this theory that he only was a photographer in Atlanta. He was not a journalist in Atlanta. And I think that he used the camera to say what he had to say without writing anything, because no one could accuse him of having an opinion. Because if he had an opinion and it wasn't welcomed as an African American male, he could have been lynched or killed in Atlanta. So when he got to Chicago working for Ebony, he started writing. He was writing from there. Plus, he was writing with Langston Hughes, and he was writing for a Black publication that was national. So he was freer to talk about the issues that he wanted to talk about or write about. And then as he moved on into the international field, I think he identified with the colonialism that was going on because it reminded him of Jim Crow and what was happening in Atlanta and other parts of the country, of the U.S. So he got himself out of a cage and he wasn't going back. That's basically what I think happened.
Yep. And his photographs help us all to see what it looked like outside of the cage during that period of time for Black people in a variety of countries and continents that many people didn't have access to. So that's one of the beauties of the collection, from my perspective.
Thank you. Well, if you think of Nkrumah, he went to Lincoln University, so he experienced what was going on in the U.S. in terms of civil rights. So he knew exactly what was going on. And then he compared it to growing up in Ghana and, the colonialism there. So I believe he used the Independence Day of Ghana as his platform to bring together whoever he wanted to bring together, who otherwise would not be able to come together. So he was strategic, I believe, in many ways.
We have a little bit of a different path type question here. Who would you, okay, so the question for Dorothy, who would you cast in the part of your dad if there was a Netflix docudrama on his life and times? Is that happening? Is that a thing? Or is that just a theoretical question?
That would be great. Anybody thinking of that, I'm up for it. But in any case, who would I, oh, shoot.
Right.
If he were younger, but this, okay, I think of somebody. Oh, I don't know. A Sidney Poitier type. That's all I could say. A Sidney Poitier type. I can't think of someone right this second.
No problem.
Oh, Idris.
I wanted to mention the book that you referenced earlier in your talk, Dorothy, The Man Died by, well, is it Sayinka?
Sure,
Just to let everybody know, we have one copy in the library. So if you want to check it out, you're gonna, try to get to it fast. It's at the John F. Germany Library, the big library downtown. And so we do have one copy of that. If that piqued your interest at all, it's available for checking out. And then I also wanted to throw a question your way about, the dance that you mentioned, the popular dance when you were, when your mother was pregnant with you. Did you call it the highlight?
Highlight. Yeah,
so
that's what it's called.
Just about what is that dance? What's that?
Pardon? It still exists now. It's still working in Ghana.
And that's the question. The question is just, what is that dance and what's that dance all about?
No, you have to get someone to teach you. I ain't gonna look it up on the web or something, but I couldn't.
I think they were looking for a description, not a demonstration.
It's a nice dance. It's a nice
dance. And another question for you. You mentioned that your father graduated first in his class. And did he talk at all about his experience in school?
Okay, so he didn't graduate. To my knowledge, he did not graduate first in his class. He was the first African American in at Columbia. He wasn't the first. He was the only African American in
that's what the
class of 49 for Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. They only allowed one Black person per year.
Right. So he was the only African American in the school at that time. And so did he describe his experience at all?
He had a good experience. He had a good experience. He kept in touch with his classmates up and really until the later years. And they at least the ones I was able to reach, they all really liked him and had great respect for him. So he had a good experience. I think that one reason why Langston Hughes offered for him to stay with him is because Langston did not have a good experience at Columbia and left, I think, after the first semester or something like that. So I think Langston was kind of protecting him of sorts, even though he was paying rent, but he was protecting him also.
Yeah, following up on the question of the first that you were saying, Matthew, that the question somebody asked, it seems like, Dorothy, your whole family were pioneers in so many things, first or only, or, so I know one of the things I said, Dorothy always tells me something new, and I found that you told me that you integrated Sidwell Friends in Washington. So you and your brother. So so it is so many areas where your family has been, pioneers all across the continent. So any other surprises like that, or any other areas that?
They're different ones. I just think that what happened is that basically our parents put us on the road less traveled. Yeah. So everything we do is like goes in a different direction, or we go sideways or some other way, but we don't go straight. So with Sidwell, actually it backs up to when we were in Tunisia, or we were leaving Tunisia. My parents decided that they wanted me and my brother to go to a private school in New Jersey. My mom's from New Jersey. So they identified a school in New Jersey through friends and wrote them and said, you know, this is what we want. And so the school said, sure, you know, this is no problem. Okay. So then my father writes them and say, well, my wife is coming over and she'd like to meet with you. And so they said, oh, no problem. And then my mom walks in the door and they realize she's Black. And they're like, oh, no, this can't work. This is not going to work. And they start backtracking, all right? So they talk about how the board doesn't accept Blacks and the parents aren't going to accept Blacks. Now, mind you, my dad or our family really, is in the Foreign Service, and we are promoting democracy and freedom and independence and all that in newly independent Tunisia. And here we are, he can't get us in school, or they can't get us in private school in New Jersey. So anyway, they sued them. They sued the state on my behalf and won. So the private schools in New Jersey opened up and it just opened. So I went to a school there, but mind you, I had already gone to school with white kids. I went to school, all kinds of kids growing up. So going to school with white kids was like, okay, normal. But it didn't faze me. So I think that part of how we got into Sidwell was that when we moved from New Jersey to DC, so my dad could work at the State Department, which I call the mothership. My dad was, Sidwell was starting to open up. And so I was the first African-American female in the school. And I'm very proud of that now. Then I didn't know anything about it, but now I am. I went to school at the same age as Malia and her daughter, her sister. They entered in 6th grade, and I was there from 6th to 8th grade. So I was really, really proud about that. That somehow led to that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm sorry to say we're well over time, but it was well worth it. I'm going to invite Alexandra to come back on the screen with us now while I pull up our contact information. Let's see here. There we go.
Yes, thank you. On the screen, you'll see the information for our partners to once again visit their website to follow up. But for the library, please reach out to us by giving us a call at 813-273-3652 or visit us on the web at hcplc.org/contact.
All right, thank you so much. And yes, those websites for the archives and the museum are there for you. That's still in the chat as well, if you want to click on that. Thank you, Alexandra. And to Dr. Antoinette Jackson and Dorothy Davis, thank you so much for visiting with us at the library and for sharing about your father's amazing life and amazing skills and helping us celebrate Black History Month. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.